Hi, welcome back to the fourth section of our um, topic for this week, Monopoly and the Imperfect Competition chapter. And now I want to briefly to show you how the demand and marginal revenue curves will look different. In case of a monopoly, and so I have calculated the marginal revenue. This is total revenue, by the way, and marginal revenue and price and quantity here. And basically, in order to add a graph, well, I cannot see the. Okay, now I can see. The buttons were not visible for me. So let's add a scatter graph like we mostly do, and let's build the demand curve. Note that the demand curve will also show us the average revenue for the company, and x values are like always the quantities, and y values are for demand. It is equal to price, and so this is our series 1. It should be visible. Let's try it again. Let's add a series. Okay, this is the demand, which is at the same time the aggregate average revenue, and the x values are the quantities, y values are the prices, and this should give us our demand curve. So we will add another series, obviously, which will be the series 2, our marginal revenue. Okay, I'm sorry. Marginal revenue. I should work on it more. So the x values are again the quantities, but y values are the marginal revenue we have found here. So when we draw it, and let me make it a little bit more beautiful, the graph at the heading, demand and MR, and add maybe also legends. And as you see, the marginal revenue curve is always below the demand curve, because mostly when you buy more, you are when you sell more, your marginal revenue is less than the price, because you are earning something equal to price, but you are also losing because the price of the previous units you have sold has reduced. So let's continue with the potential cases for the monopoly. The main point is this: as long as the demand curve, not marginal revenue curve, but the demand curve is above the average total cost curve, this would mean our monopoly is having profit. I have mentioned a lot on the way you calculate the profit in case of a company with perfect competitive market. This is pretty much similar, and here you can see again this rectangle here represents the profit, which you can see here, for example. Also, let me make it larger. Okay. and let me go a little bit down. Okay, you can see this is the demand curve, which is also average revenue curve. So you calculate the marginal cost. You find the point where marginal cost curve, increasing section of the marginal cost curve, and the marginal revenue curve intersect, which is here, and then you go up. On the demand curve, you find the average revenue. Below the on the average total cost curve, you find the average cost curve. So the difference is the profit per unit, and then you multiply it with the quantity. So this area represents the profit or loss, basically. Well, as long as the demand curve, not the marginal revenue curve, but the demand curve is above the average total cost curve, at least for some sections, you can basically guess that at least for some quantities, the average revenue, the revenue you get when you sell that amount of product, is more than the average cost. And when, at least for some quantities, average revenue is more than average cost, that would mean you will make profit. Well, just basically take into account that when average revenue is above average cost, of course the company is making profit, or for any quantity, if the opposite is the case, the average revenue is below the average cost, in that case the company is making loss. So this is for any quantity. For the for example, for when the quantity is producing at this level, since the average revenue represented here is below the average total cost, the company should be making loss. But this is not the profit maximizing quantity for the company, for our monopoly. Profit maximizing quantity is this point. And at this point, our company is making profit. If we didn't know the marginal cost curve or the marginal revenue curve, if we just had demand curve and the average total cost curve, could we basically say that this company is making profit at the profit maximizing level? Yes, because since for at least some quantities demand is above the average total cost curve, we know, well, at least for some quantities, this company is able to make profit when it produces and sells those quantities. So the company at the profit maximizing level, in that case, should be making profit. Well, the other case is the case when the company is certainly always make losses, is this case when the demand curve is below the average total cost curve for all quantities. So in that case, basically, there is no quantity at which the average revenue represented by the points on the demand curve is above the average total cost curve. So in this case, our company will basically can only minimize the loss. It cannot maximizes the profit, which is in a way like maximizing the profit if you think loss as a negative of the profits. So at this point, at the quantity 1000 here, in this case, the distance between the average total cost curve and the demand curve is the smallest, which means this is the point where the company is making the smallest amount of loss. And you find it a similar way. You find the intersection of the marginal cost curve and marginal revenue curve. And when you go up, you first find the average revenue curve, and then you find the average cost curve. So again, you subtract from the average revenue, average cost, and you find a negative amount, and you multiply it with the quantity. You find a negative amount again. In this case, it will be minus 1000, and it will be, of course, loss. So it's you can find profit as a negative amount. Alternatively, you can find basically you can basically subtract from the average revenue the average cost and find the loss in positive amount. So just with our Excel file actually, our profit maximizing, well, we cannot find here the average revenue, so let's skip this part for now. So let's continue. Is it possible for our company to basically break even, which means well, not making any loss, but also not making any profit at the profit maximizing quantity? It's possible. It's the case when our marginal cost curve and the marginal revenue curve intersects with each other. Well, I'm sorry. The demand curve or the average revenue curve and the long run average cost curve basically intersect only at one point. In other words, our demand curve is tangent to the long run average cost curve. This is the case when our company is breaking even, not making loss or not making any revenue at the profit maximizing point. How do you know it? You know, except this point, at any other point, the average revenue is below the average cost. So the company will make loss. But at this point, average revenue and average costs are equal to each other, which means, well, when you subtract them from each other, you got zero. You might neither make loss nor profit at this point. And basically, this should be the profit maximizing point, even without looking to the marginal cost and marginal revenue curve. But also, the marginal revenue and marginal cost curve should intersect exactly below the point where the demand and average cost curves are tangent to each other. Well, will a loss-making monopoly quit the market? In the long run, yes, if it cannot change the situation and increase the demand. In the short run, basically, just like the case of the companies in perfectly competitive market, if they can cover the average variable cost, they will stay in the market. Again, remember, these companies are just caring for their profits and losses. So the company structure is exactly the same, just the same company is operating at a different market. In case of our monopoly model, we don't have a different type of company, we have a similar type of company, basically, in the monopoly market. So what is the implications of the monopoly market? Let's talk about that a little bit. Well, for our monopoly, of course, if our monopoly is just breaking even, in that case, our monopoly is not earning any positive amount of profits anyway. So when we have an alternative to the monopoly, let's say non-profit maximizing company just caring for the social benefit steps in, well, in that case, again, if that company should be self-sufficient, at least it should break even, not make any loss, and it should again produce at this point. So there won't be any difference in this case. If our monopoly is already making loss, of course, a non-profit maximizing company is also not able to produce at the point let's say at any point, because it will basically make loss. But our monopoly might also pretty much have a case like this. In this case, well, our monopoly is producing at the point A the 2,000 units for $6 of price, but it is very much possible for a self-sufficient company to produce also at this point, maybe at $5 at a higher quantity. So it is actually possible to reduce costs and increase quantities in case of a monopoly. That's the basic point of it. Of course, here we have two different points. If I were a strong supporter of neoclassical economics, I would say maybe an alternative company who is not profit maximizing might not make sufficient investment or not have sufficient, let's say, efficiency, so its cost might be higher. But anyway, let's stop here. Let's meet again in the next section of this topic, since our time is very much close to the 15 minutes.